who's gonna teach our kids about a healthy sex future if we don't do it? But if we don't do it ourselves, you're spending all your time thinking everything's fucked and you're just completely lost. But guess what? This is like how everybody else, this is how every other mom and dad is feeling right now. And guess what? Here's when it gets better. And here's what you can look forward to. And here's some tools, right? So I don't know, I'm kind of ranting, but I get really excited about a possible future reality where where this stuff is more communicated and more normalized, you know.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Sex After Kids podcast. Very excited to share you a little sneak peek from the Sex After Kids Summit, which I held in November 2024 from the vault. This was a really special interview that I did with a gentleman named Dan Doty. He runs a program called Fatherhood Unlocked. It's mostly for new and expecting dads, but he is a long time working with youth and young men and adult men around masculinity and fatherhood and all the things. And we really get into a lot of the questions that I think it's just sort of exploring what is the journey for dads post kids, right? What is the experience of a person in the gender of a man with a penis after he has a baby? Because we talk a lot about the female experience. We put a lot of emphasis on understanding that. Certainly my internet feeds are full of the concept of matrescence, which is like puberty, but for motherhood. And we don't talk equivalently about the identity transformation for fathers. So they may not be going through leaky boobs and hormone changes, but they're still going through an identity shift. They're still going through a life rearrangement. And certainly the more we live in an equitable relationship, the more they're going through that. If they're living in a relationship where their life essentially gets to be the status quo with children added to it, then there's less of a shift, I find. And many men are in that situation. And if they're in the shift where they're like, get the opportunity to take paternity leave, like my husband and other things like that, then they're definitely experiencing a different reality and a different way of prioritizing their life and all of these things. And when we don't talk about that and make that a conscious and intentional shift, it can be harder than it needs to be. And of course, we talk a lot about intimacy and how that relates and how men and women traditionally under the gendered lens view intimacy differently. So I'm very excited for you to have a listen to this longer episode. We're going to be kind of diving in over the next 4 episodes to kind of, the perspective of men and males and fatherhood and all of those things. So let me know in the comments, in the IG DMs, if you have questions. Always here for them. Would love to be able to answer those in future podcast episodes. And if you're a papa who's listening and you're a papa who in particular is the higher libido partner, the partner who's wanting sex all the time, then make sure to check the show notes for the Roommates to Romance Challenge. I made it for you to have something to do that's not pestering your wife constantly with the same old moves or pestering your partner constantly with conversations about your sex life that go round and round and round and round. So if you want to break the cycle and actually get into bed with each other in a way that isn't full of pressure and awkwardness, then you're going to want to check that out. It's only $9 and you can grab the link in the show notes. All right, without further ado, let's toss it to Dan.
Welcome, Dan, to the Sex After Kids Summit. Dan is the founder of Fatherhood Unlocked, and we're here today to talk about fatherhood, rites of passage, and sexy times. Dan, maybe we can start. You can just tell us a little bit about who you are and the work that you do.
Yeah, I'm a dad of 3. I've been married for 10 years. We live on the coast of Maine, and I have been working with both boys and men in really intimate settings for 2 decades. I started out as a wilderness therapy guide. I kind of got this like really close up look at the lives of boys and their dads together. And watching boys and dads really sort of melt the walls between them was the thing that really set my entire career, right? I've had this experience of men's true vulnerability in a way that I think is world changing. And so that's kind of been the heart of my work ever since. And today we're working um, with expecting fathers, and of course we have, and then our creating community for dads at large as well.
That's so awesome. It's such important work. And yeah, we live all the way up in the wilderness here too, so I totally get that. So let's kick this off with first question is, like I was saying before we jumped onto the recording, I think the internet is sort of waking up to this term called matrescence, which is this idea that women or people who birth babies go through a big, pretty seismic like identity shift as they step into motherhood or parenthood. But I don't think we hear as talked about as much, or certainly not in my world, this notion of like patrescence, or a rite of passage for men and dads as they become a parent. So I'm curious if you could talk a little bit about that, what you've seen over your 20 years, and how that shift in identity can impact a person's kind of relationship, connection to their sexuality, or their sexual connection with their partner.
Yeah, I guess where I would start is to say that, I have been pretty plugged in and diligent about my own growth and trying to get as much information about both parenthood and marriage and, evolution, my own evolution as possible. And even with all of that, I have been totally fucking blown away by the impact of fatherhood and the depth of the challenge of relationship after parenthood. And I feel like I sometimes I wonder, am I unique, right? Is this just really hard for me, or is this? But it's not, right? I've worked with thousands of dudes, and the change that we undergo when we become a parent, whether we are a mom or a dad, is fundamentally it's a total reset, right? It's a complete reset on our identity and how we engage in the world, and obviously different for men and women for very obvious reasons, right? But I guess what I would maybe highlight right off the bat, though, that maybe the internet is hip to matrescence, but I don't think the men on the internet are hip to matrescence. I think that's probably a very tiny fraction of men who know what that word means, and an even tinier fraction of men who actually grok what it looks and feels like and what that actually means until you've gone through it with one child, or maybe better two or better three, right? And the word putrescence has, when I've said that, or when it's come up on calls, even with like women's communities of birth practitioners, they're like, oh yeah, oh, I guess there is a putrescence too, right? It's like, oh yeah. And it's to me, it's this one of these parts of our culture which I just think is fascinating and unfortunate, where the biggest stuff in our lives, right, like marriage, children, money, sex, it's just like we just can't seem to do the cultural transmission of what the village used to do, right? I feel like, in human history for so long we just saw this shit all the time, and now we're just in this weird dispersed sort of puzzle of a culture. And so these ideas of like what you go through when you become a dad, you go through what your partner's going to go through when they become a mom, we're just fucking clueless, And so
yeah, there's no acknowledgement, there's no elder
bummer.
transmission, there's no let's pause and take a deep breath and like acknowledge this is not just like a skipping stone, this is like a moment.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think it's fascinating, and I think a lot of people are waking up to it. So maybe more men are aware of what matrescence means that I'm aware of. But yeah.
So what happens then, I guess, I'm not a dude, I don't have a penis. I try to be as compassionate as possible. I think often what I see, right, is I'm seeing a lot of the women coming to me, or, even if they don't have a uterus, people with lower libidos who are struggling because they may be feeling a lot of pressure from their partner who's constantly making moves. And I think there can be an easy judgment of this, typically male, but like drive for sex, that it's always just trying to get in my pants. I'm a piece of meat. Like we can stereotype what our partner wants. And
Yeah.
likewise, I think men can stereotype women, or men can stereotype their partner as frigid, frozen, lazy, or the wheel spiral that she doesn't think I'm attractive anymore or whatever. So I guess I'm curious for, the women who are watching or the people who are partnered with men, in your experience, kind of like what's going on for dudes in this scenario, and how can we shift some of our perspective around their need and their desire for this kind of connection after kids?
Yeah, so I'll say kind of the same thing in two very different ways. The first thing is that, and this is true for me and a lot of men I know, is that there is a fundamental, sex and intimacy is the primary way that I know that I'm loved
Mm.
by my partner. And to look at a man's bid for sex and intimacy, um, not through a yeah, so like a not through like a consumer relationship or like a but to see that this runs really, 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 and this I'm generalizing. This isn't for every dad out there, obviously, but I
Right.
think way more than not that there is a almost an existential fear that lies beneath the surface here that you know that a real lack of intimacy or physical intimacy stirs up, and I think that has a really corrosive effect on on a marriage and a man's mind and the whole thing, and I think it's hard for most men to maybe even know that or understand that, let alone communicate that in a really direct way. And honestly, and I'll have my wife's permission here, but I'll be candid, right? So my wife and I went through a lot of struggles with intimacy. She had a lot of sexual trauma in her childhood, and when we got married, it roared to the surface, and I had my baggage that I was carrying, and man, we worked at it and really like for many, many, many years. And I'm happy to say we got there, right? We got to a place where it's easeful and just quite wonderful. But that little point about her understanding that, because no matter how deeply and clearly she knew me in my heart and where I was coming from, there was a part of a story for her that I was just another dude trying to get off, right? And like and at times I'm sure there's part of that was true for me, right? I don't want to say that that's not part of it, but like the wild majority was that like there is the level of safety and security that I feel in the relationship, and just this like this like relaxing of like, okay, I know I belong. There's I don't know, there's something very important, I think, about just recognizing that it is a love language, and I don't mean that like in a book term, but it is a language for men to really feel love. And I do feel that when kids come into the picture, the feeling your partner's attention go to their kids first is something people talk about and write about, and it's a big deal. And it never like, for me personally, it was never like a direct jealousy thing, but more just like a left out feeling. And I
Yeah.
think this cultural meme of like what are guys good for, I think, is around for a reason, honestly, right? Like in a lot of biologic, like other mammals, other animals in the world, sometimes like the sexing happens and then the man dies, right? Or the male dies, right? It's like
Yeah.
there's something that's not totally false
Mhm.
about that, right? So that's my first answer. My second answer is that men are really fragile. Our
Mhm.
egos are really fragile. And Esther Perel was a mentor and a friend of mine, and she came to and like did a workshop for some men at a retreat that I was leading. And what she led with was, has always stuck with me, and it's like no woman has ever had to prove to anyone that she was a woman, like never. But a man is going through
Mhm.
his life continuously, kind of like subconsciously, feeling that he needs to prove himself, right? And what that leads to is a real fragility, right? And I would also say, because of how boys are conditioned out of their emotionality when they're young, that the emotional fragility of men is pretty fucking substantial.
Yeah.
So I think you put some of these things together, and the lack of emotional robustness, the lack of sort of ease and fluency with talking about hard things, and then yeah, just like I said before we were on, I just feel like men often, like our tools in our toolbox were like not really made for this big of a like emotional, psychosocial, romantic, sexual puzzle.
Hmm.
Right. I feel and I don't mean to say that men can't do it. I actually think they can quite quickly with a little guidance and support,
Yeah.
but we're not training this, you know, we're not
No.
like
I mean,
teaching it.
I'm hearing this like multiple layers of factors, right? Because there's like what I'm hearing from you in one piece in this is for men to acknowledge that pretty much any woman they've ever been with is going to have some form of trauma, deep and heavy or not, around
Yeah.
relationships with men. And many of those relationships have felt transactional and extractive, right? Even if it was just a guy hitting on me or whatever, right? And I often talk about this with my women. It's like, even if my brain knows I'm with a safe, kind, loving man who doesn't treat me that way, my body doesn't think that, right? My trauma doesn't
Mhm.
think that. And so for men to acknowledge that her judgment of you trying to extract from her may come from your behavior, and it may also come from this trauma and these
Yeah.
experiences. And so if you want to win a way out of that situation, you're going to have to get a little proficient in like nervous system safety and like how to help her body learn how to relax over that moment and get over that narrative, right? And I think for women as well to acknowledge that that is a trauma response, and how do we work with that trauma response when we want to give this kind of interaction to this person that we love, who's caring and loving with us, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and then I think the other piece that I hear in you with that is that men really connect this way, and it's their
Yeah.
primary way to feel loved and valued in a relationship. And so you can see how quickly that spirals out of control when there is no sex happening. And then there
Yeah.
becomes this tit for tat where like, I don't feel valued, so I'm not going to do certain stuff for you. And then women are like, but when you do the chores and when you do the things and when you equal weight carry the weight of the home with me, like that's when I want to do you. And he's like, but you're not doing me, so I don't want to do those things. And
Yeah.
so I
Yeah.
always remember again, you know, Esther Perel, but and I talk about this all the time, is like we have to keep the oxygen mask on our own selves first, and then on our relationship, and then on
Yeah.
our kids, if we want to stay married, which is likely the best outcome for our kids, unless our relationship should not be one that stays together. And I think women in
Yeah.
particular forget that, because the spotlight goes to the kids, especially in those early years when you're breastfeeding and everything. And I'm just out of the 3-year haze with my youngest. And you just like forget about this other person who used to be the only one who cuddled you and eye gazed with you and touched your body in
Yeah.
any kind of way, right? And so trying to remind couples like put that oxygen mask on you as a team and develop
Yeah.
whatever tools you can is so important. And then I think the third piece I'm hearing from you is like those skills, which we're trying to teach at this summit. um,
Yeah. Yeah.
there's an amazing workshop about genital de-armoring that Rahi Chun is going to do, which is wonderful if you've got a partner who's in a lot of trauma. Communication skills and all those kinds of things. And it really is just about investing in some of these broader skill sets, which people go, oh, who the fuck has time for that? But I'm sure you can see this in your work. Like when you invest in these skills in your relationship, you invest in them in your parenting too. Um,
Oh yeah. Yeah.
and like one of my favorite, I was just looking at some of your reels and you were talking about that investment in like intentional presence with your children. And like the same goes for your partner. Where's that like
Well,
20
exactly,
minutes
right?
a day, right? Tell me more.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, you're referring to one of my favorite practices for dads and parenting is just to set a timer for starting with 10 minutes or 15 minutes, putting on an airplane mode, and then dropping into your kid's world and just like going along, right? So that's just completely letting your agenda go away, bringing all your attention, and maybe they want to, you know, make a tea party or wrestle or whatever. They're just theirs, right?
Yeah.
And I think that oh man, it's so powerful, it's so helpful, right, on so many levels. Like you invest, you get that really good like electric connection of actual presence with your kid, but it also functions as like a meditation practice. It really does. It's like, oh, I'm thinking about work again, okay, come back to the kid, you know. And it's so good. It's like it's all there, right? But yes, it's just as good, maybe even more important. Actually, one thing that triggered when you were talking is that I had an epiphany a couple years ago that I was like 110% in on my kids, 110% in on my work, and maybe like 65% in on my marriage. I was like, it was like a huge wake up call. And you also said that for moms especially, it's zoning on the kids first, and then kind of forget yourself, forget the marriage. And I think it's equally, from the men that come to me anyway, it's equally real that self tends to come last, right? And I don't know if that's seen or understood, but it really is. I think I did a big sort of series of conversations last year with Rochelle Garcia Saliga, who works mostly with women, and we were here just to have this conversation, like, how do we do this together, men and women? Like, how do we parent together? How do we do life today? Because it seems extra hard. And the number one message the women had for the men is, you have to take care of yourself and resource yourself completely, right? Like, you have to do it, dude. Like, there's no way around this. You're not okay, and when you're not okay, we're not okay. Like, it's just like, and obviously they had the same sort of, they had to them for themselves as well. But that was, I think, like, so many dads, especially in this first 5 years, when kids are still 5 and under, man, they're fucked up. Like, to be really frank, right? Like, really, really on the verge of burnt out, or burnt out all the way. And our daughter, our youngest, is just about to turn 3 too, right? And even just in this last 3 or 4 months, like you said, that we noticed the bandwidth opening up. It's such a wild truth, isn't it? It's such a
Yeah.
real thing. But
Crawling out of the hole.
anyway, yeah, and I think dads are starting to get the messages and having the understanding here, but not fully, right? I just don't think we've yet to dictate a clear path through all this stuff that actually lands in a way that we can kind of like rest our minds and be like, okay, this is where we're at, and this is how it feels for so many people. And the last thing I'll say is just, like, I think one thing that'd be really, really helpful here beyond the skills is the well, one thing that's been huge for me is doing the reading and understanding of how sex improves with age, like beyond your 30s, 40s, 50s, and just like how satisfaction and things like grow as you go older. And what an amazing epiphany, like, or what an awesome reality to wake up to. And so what I'm getting at here is sort of a back to, like, the lack of rites of passage, or lack of initiation or culture, lack of elders, lack of communication, because I just think most guys are stuck on a high school vision of sexuality, or maybe college, or maybe early 30s, and we don't, if you don't see it, how can you like follow it, right? And so there's something missing about basic communication and education, which I'm hoping to help men and dads get with the work I do. Just like, listen, you're spending all your time thinking everything's fucked, and you're just completely lost. But guess what? This is like how everybody else, how every other mom and dad is feeling right now. And guess what? Here's when it gets better. And here's what you can look forward to. And here's some tools, right? So I don't know, I'm kind of ranting, but I get really excited about the a possible future reality where where this stuff is more communicated and more normalized.
It's so true. And like, we go through the 5 phases of sexual relationships with Jen Purcell in one of the interviews. And say, you're probably, well, maybe you're a little bit more advanced, but like phase 2 is like maintenance. We've got our routines, we're doing our thing. And I think parents in our kind of age group cohort, kids with this age, you slowly start to want things that are kind of new and novel. But then you evolve past that to wanting some more depth and
Yeah,
intimacy out of those
yeah,
things. And I always talk about, like, where did you learn about sex? Like, where did your sex expectations come from? The media, where people just smash their faces together with no words, and
yeah,
everything's like super hot and horny, and people flick on at the switch of a nothing. Like, that's not how it
mhm,
works, man. And like, when
yeah,
you've been in a long-term relationship, even without kids, desire looks different. And then you add children, and libidos operate
yeah,
differently. And so much of this summit, even, but just even here, is about like, what actually matters to you about sex? Like, why do you do it? What motivates
yeah,
you to have sex?
yeah,
And like, ask yourself that question like 7 times, like explore what's underneath that, and have a conversation with your partner about that. And like, that's scary. That's the vulnerability part. But that's where like we get to create the sex life that we want. There's no right amount of
Yeah.
times to be doing it. There's no right ways to be doing it. And there's a full menu of options out there that so many of us, because of all the shame and taboo around this topic, like our blinders are here. And like, no
Yeah.
wonder it's not satisfying
Yeah.
then. Even if we are having sex on a fairly regular basis, it's often short-lived, not very exciting. And like, then you get into this negative loop where like, if it was mediocre last time, like I'm super hot to go again, you know? Which
Yeah.
again, when you talk about ego, I mean, gosh, we could go down a whole rabbit hole around like sexual rites of passage and like how we learn about sex and how we pass on
Yeah.
knowledge. But that ego piece and that ego fragility, we have a society that sets men up to be stags with tons of experience, and women set up to be these virginal, pure things that are supposed to get taught by their men. And I think this frustration can happen where she's going like, why the fuck don't you have magic hands? And why can't you just read my body? And like, those are her expectations. Why aren't you the guy out of the romance novel who just knows what to do? And he's like, why am I not, I'm supposed to be this stud. I'm supposed to be a 5-star sex chef, even though I've never cracked a book about the clitoris. Like,
Yeah.
come on, man.
Yeah.
This is a fail or like a lose for both of you,
Yes.
Yeah.
One of my former clients and friends, I don't know if they still have this anymore, but they created I think they just called it the sex journal or a sex journal. And it was literally a journal for each partner to fill out after each time of intimacy,
Mm.
which my wife and I didn't ever pick it up and do that. But what I liked about that just idea is just being in a learning a learning mindset together. Like wow, what a change to people's lives if that could be the case, right? To actually just like, hey, lay down whatever you thought or I thought, but let's just start from the ground up here. And it took my wife and I a lot of years to get to that place, but once we got there, it's like, oh fuck yeah, like thank goodness we got
Yeah.
here.
Well, and I find
Yeah.
sex after kids is this opportunity where you may have had a sex life that was coasting or feeling pretty good before kids. And it's not a guarantee it's shit after. Like some women are more responsive after kids and things work more easily. But to me, like a big thing for guys to kind of understand is when we talk about that matrescence piece, like not only are there a whole slew of physical changes that happen, but there's a
Mhm.
whole new set of cultural myths with becoming a mom who is sexual. I'm curious about like dads who are sexual probably don't have the same baggage, though there might be some, right? Being a sexual thing and a wife. And I find sometimes like this is the compassion I offer to men is like men may not be able to hold those two identities of their wives or their partner in the
Mm.
same breath, right? Like you made my babies. How can I
Yeah.
you know
Yeah.
but oh gosh, I've lost my train of thought. Basically like the whole landscape's changed and I talk about how you need a new map, right? And
Yeah.
so you could have coasted and now all those skills that you didn't really need to develop in your 20s or, before you had kids, now when everything's changed, you do need to blank slate. You do need to be like, I can't assume that licking your nipples is what is a go for you anymore because maybe it's
Totally.
a total no go and
Totally.
maybe something else is a new go that wasn't to go before, right? And so the
Yeah.
invitation and the interesting part is like you get to go on a treasure hunt if you treat it that way.
Yeah.
And you get to experiment and fail forward. But so many of us are like, I'm using the manual from before and it's not working. I guess the manual's
Yeah.
broken and you're like, well, you need a new one.
Something that I haven't done, but I've thought about, or I think somebody else should maybe do, is if you took like the different sort of through lines in a man's psyche or his whole self, right? So your emotional, your spiritual, your sexual, your relational, your social, all of those parts, and I think it's a very functional exercise to go through. So if I'm talking about myself, right? So what would it look like for me to be emotionally mature, like on a timeline, right? Like what does it actually look like for a man who's like really gotten to like an adult maturity of emotionality? And financially and all of socially, all of these different parts of life. But then doing that for sexuality specifically, I think would be huge, huge, huge. And maybe somebody has it. Maybe somebody has like
Yeah.
charted that workout. Have you heard of it? Because I think
I mean,
again,
I could
I
think
just
of
think
all
we're
the
like,
things that define that. I'd be curious if someone had mapped that out.
yeah,
Yeah, but like, what does it mean to be to me, it's like a great lover or like a sexually mature person, right?
sexually mature person. Yeah, and yeah,
And
exactly.
you're
Like,
totally
what's it look
twinging.
like?
Yeah, on like I had this boyfriend in my when I was like 19, and 10 years later we had a one night stand, and I remember having this moment where I was like, "Oh shit, I have evolved sexually. I have learned some things. I have
So,
more comfort being present in my body." All these, and I was like, "You have not changed. You are." I could
yeah,
sense his discomfort in the vulnerability of landing fully in the moment with me. So he was rushing
yeah,
everything, and I was like, "Chill out, man!" Like I was the one going, like, "Let's relax,"
yeah,
And that was such a light bulb moment for me to be like, "I have evolved here." And this person
yeah,
hasn't. And
yeah.
like, what does that mean for how we teach men to evolve sexually? Um,
Well, and here's why I think it's freaking has to happen. I mean, for a lot of reasons, for all the reasons, but just like with anything else, how should I say this? Who's gonna teach our kids about a healthy sex future if we don't do it? But if we don't do it ourselves, and yeah, I mean, and I'm always kind of stuck in that question or that process, right? So I'm working both with dads at the moment that they're become dad. I also do a lot of work with adolescent boys too, like initiation work with adolescent boys. And I'm like, well, if I had to pick one, what should I do? Should I work with the boys and help get them going off, or should I work with the dads? It's kind of like both work, both are functional. But when it comes to sexuality, this actually was this January. I went to a weekend sort of initiation experience for 11 to 15-year-old boys, and I wasn't facilitating. I was actually there with a mentee of mine, kind of being his elder for the process.
cool.
And man, they brought in the best sex educator I had ever like blew the minds of every dad in that room, of every a man in that room. It was like the quality of what was shared. It just like hit all the notes and was just so awesome. And like the watching the eyes of the men, the dads in that room, like we needed it too, right? It was for the 11-year-olds or 12-year-olds. It was for the 47-year-olds too, right?
Yeah.
And so I don't know. I just think yeah, it's so I have two boys and a daughter. My boys are 8, 6, and 2, and we've had my oldest and I have had some good talks, and so we've like very much begun the process of education on sexuality. And
It's
I'll,
so,
I'll tell one last quick story because it's funny.
yeah.
So like I had a big talk with my oldest son. He was 7 at the time, and then like literally like the next day or the day after, my middle son walked in on my wife and I in the middle of afternoon nap, and then he went back downstairs and told everybody, "Mom and Dad are like, I don't know, they're napping, but they're naked or something." And so my oldest son came upstairs later, and he was like, "Dad." So we just talked about it. He's like, "Dad, were you guys sexing?" And like my immediate reaction was like, no, no, like I lied
Yeah.
to him. But then I came back and told him I lied, right? But
Yeah.
anyway, it's this stuff is on my mind all the time. I think it's
But
really
what I
critical
love
for us
about
to grow up.
what I love about what you're bringing up is also what I say, which is like, in order for our children to be in healthy relationships, they need to see healthy relationships modeled. And what we continue to model right now is like, our children don't need to see our sex lives, but it is okay and
Yeah,
actually appropriate for them to know that we have one, and that
yeah,
that is a healthy
yeah,
part of a healthy relationship. And everyone has their own comfort levels, but there's a lot of like, the kids are in the house, like, don't nuzzle the back of my neck, don't make out with me, don't what, and it's like, what if you meaningfully kissed each other before you left the
yeah,
house, to the point where your kids were like, ew, gross. But like,
yeah,
you almost kind of want that reaction to be like, yes, like, this
yeah,
is what it means to be in a loving physical relationship with another human. And I have a friend who told me his parents, 2 o'clock every day, they'd kick the kids outside. Everybody knew what was happening inside the house. Nobody went in, but they knew that that was mom and dad's time. And I think this shame
yeah,
around like, I can't be a parent and a sexual person, or my children can't know I'm a sexual person, we're cutting off this huge piece of ourselves, and we're not modeling to them that that's a huge piece of them and who they're going to be. And that being loving and caring with your spouse in ways that feel good for them is really a part of I mean, how many of us can think back to our parents like touching each other in any kind of like, even just hugging a lot? Like, so many of us just even
No. Yeah.
unconsciously shut that all down, you know? I'm
Yeah.
always teasing my partner
Yeah.
because he squicks more than me. I'm like, honey, that's just the kid. But he has a very different comfort level than me with the PDAs, as we say. So
Yeah, totally.
I think it's just another reason to motivate people who are watching, I guess, that like this work can feel hard for sure. It's deep. It's vulnerable. And like you said, it took your wife and you a couple years. Like, this is not a one and done, 2 seconds and we're fixed thing. This isn't let's buy some sex toys and lingerie and everything's gonna be magically awesome. But when you invest in it, you learn many of the skills that help you to become a better person at work and
Yeah.
in your other places. You become a better spouse, and you role model and like break some of these generational cycles around sexual shame and taboo. So that's why it feels like you're doing heavy lifting, because you are, but the ripple effect is huge in terms of what you can create. And when you're thinking about raising young women who feel connected to their pleasure and like they deserve it, and when you feel like you're raising sons who know how to manage that desire in ways that are respectful and caring, like, what better gift, you know?
Like, what better thing for the whole race of humanity, right? Like honestly, like
Yeah.
if that's actually could be the outcome, there's not much that's more important. I honestly feel,
Yeah, totally.
Have you seen the Instagram or social media memes where people? I'm assuming we're roughly the same generation, but I was born in the '80s, right?
And me
And
too.
there's these memes that are like, oh, all is well in my life, but when I graduated high school, I got 911 for president. When I graduated college, I got the Great Recession, and when I had my first kid, the global pandemic, right? So just like this idea of this generation that's saddled with certain responsibilities. And I've been thinking about trying to write one about what you're saying, because I think it is for people in my bubble anyway, like the level of kind of work and difficulty that's happening right now. I mean, it feels like we're going through like we're shedding a skin, or we're like, I don't know, transforming, or
Totally.
it's like it's a heavy fucking time to be a parent, right? It's like, God, could we just like, I don't know, raise kids and have a job and fuck and like have this, like, couldn't we just live? But it's like every little thing. It's like, no, we have to do this way better. And it's not because we're guilted into doing it better. It's just because like it's just not working as is anymore, right? Like the normal stuff isn't working. So we actually have to do this evolution part. We have to grow. It's like,
Yeah.
what a fucking drag.
So much work. And but at the
Yeah,
same time, I'm like, sex is all about like embracing that pleasure, right? The joie, the like all the
totally.
yummy things, and can be that antidote to stress, right? I mean, I don't know, like we could go into a whole other thing about how sex helps men with stress, and their libido can very much be affected by stress, in particular when like work and stuff is
Yeah,
crazy. But
yeah,
when we have a good intimate session, when we even just get naked and touch each other, like good things happen in our brains that combat all the stress that we're
yeah.
experiencing, right?
My
Totally.
wife and I really a couple years back just kind of like intentionally decided like we're gonna up our level of cuddling. We're gonna do the long hugs. We're gonna do the long like it's like it's such a fucking hack. But you're right. Like, and this is I kind of debate whether to say this out loud or not. But one of the again, I think I alluded to this already. But men will be like you're right. Like one good intimate session can be like a real like it's all worth it. Like all of this stress, like there's a balance, there's a float, there's a void, and I just feel like for me it's there's so much holding, and there's so much responsibility, and there's so much to do, and there's so much that it's like, wait a minute, we can like look in each other's eyes and have this like blissful, like almost ecstatic, pleasurable, it's like, whoa, this is a different world, right? It's like, man, this other stuff and this are like we got to do both, otherwise gets
Yeah.
really heavy, you know.
It's kind of like stepping outside of the matrix. And I know for sure, like for me, I had an autoimmune, I got diagnosed with like hypothyroidism after I had my kids. So my libido was like, for this last one, I was like, holy cow, it's like underground. And I've just been putting in some serious effort to like actually initiating with my partner, which is using the tool that I use to not expect myself to just be turned on, but to know like I have a desire to connect in this way with my partner, and I'm going to create a party that my libido wants to come to, and do that. And it's certainly a reinforcement of like everything we've said, like how much thanks I get for days afterwards.
Yeah.
Not that we had sex, that I put in the effort to initiate a kind of connection that really matters to him, and how loved and felt and seen and like appreciated he felt that I did that, even if it didn't go well, honestly.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, it's huge. Cool. Well, any last words, Dan, or anything you want to say about how people can work and connect with you before we part ways today?
I mean, just one last thought would just be, I guess, for any dad listening, just to think it's really a wonderful opportunity, right? Like to like get over your own self and get like the framing the challenge or the problem, so it seems like a challenge or a problem, as like you know, an opportunity that like a lot of good shit lies at the end of, is I think just really important. So I would say that, wherever you are, everything goes a step at a time, and it really is an opportunity to feel better, to be a better partner, be a better parent, everything, right? Just to kind of, the goodness lies there if you just are willing to walk through it. Yeah, and then in terms of to plug deeper into my world, I've just recently like taking on social media for the first real time, having fun with it. So we're on Instagram at Fatherhood Unlocked. We have fatherhoodunlocked.com, which is sort of the umbrella business or organization I'm growing. Fatherhood Ready is the course that we have for expecting fathers. And I'm just I'm just like shouting that from every rooftop, that a lot of good can be done by giving dads a heads up before the intensity of everything comes. And so we're just really asking everybody to share that with their expecting friends and all of that. It's just, I think it's a big deal. So that's at fatherhoodready.com. That has its own separate website.
Thank you so much. I appreciate your time today, and we'll talk to you soon.